Hello and welcome to yet another special conversation here at News 9 Plus at the Raisena 2023. We've been speaking to several prominent personalities about foreign policy, national security and global governance. And today joining us is a very special guest who changed in many ways the course of history, at least the course of Indian politics and Indian government. Joining us is senior journalist, you all know her, Chitra Subramaniam. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us. I want to begin by asking you, you are here at Raisena, although you've been staying abroad for quite some time, but how is it coming at the Raisena Dialogues? What do you think about this premier think tank event that has emerged over the years at a time when New Delhi is continuously a focus point of dialogue, convergence and peace efforts in many ways? What do you think about the Raisena Dialogues?
Thank you very much, Aditya, for your kind words. What I think about, there are two things here. I think the Raisena dialogue is, it's coming at a time where, at one point all the foreign ministers were in India a few months ago. It's a very happening thing, this Raisena dialogue. And the reason I say this is that the person leading it, Samir, I have a lot of respect for him because Samir called out the Chinese before anybody in the world and his views on climate finance. And the reason I say this is it's a premier, it's perhaps the world's most important think tank, not just Asia or anything. So what do I think about this edition? I think it's good. You can't say good or bad, but you need to have dialogue. You need to have provocation, like they said, a lighthouse in the tempest, because we are living at a very tumultuous time in history. And when I say we, it's the whole world. You do not know what's going to happen. We have a war in Europe. The pandemic is still not gone. And there are transatlantic relations that are stressful. So, and to be able to pull everything like this and have a platform that you discuss all these issues threadbare, I think that's what this edition is doing.
What do you think about India's emergence in the global new order? You heard Prime Minister Modi over the last 8 years speaking about India's increasing role globally. Also, we saw Prime Minister Modi speak at the Bali summit that this is not an era of war. Increasingly, India's position yet again on the Russia-Ukraine conflict has been absolutely neutral, encouraging all parties to have negotiations and peace efforts and talks. So how do you see New Delhi emerging as this central point, convergence of dialogue, peace efforts, and somehow India playing a very key role in it?
I think there's a lot of envy. People are envious of this, and I'm saying this as an Indian. Come hell or high water, India will emerge as a major power. For the simple reason that we are 1.4 billion people, governments come and go. But I think what is happening is that people are envious of India's growth story. I can criticize my country inside and say, okay, this is not working, that is not working. But globally, I am very proud of what's happening. Mr. Modi's views, I may not agree with everything that he says, but I've never agreed. Why do I have to agree with any Prime Minister or not? I think he's pulling India up. Some people can say he's pulling them down, but I'm waiting and watching. Because you can't decide the fate of a country in 2 years or 3 years. Things take time. It's like pushing the whole, things take time. And like, give you an example, the European Union, it's a good example. Europe is just 75 years old. I mean, there were tanks watching into, I'm not diverting. And now you have Mr. Putin, he's sort of threatening the entire Europe. So I believe that Indians, it's India's time. And I do not attribute it to this government or that government, because we will come up, come hell or high water, because we're intelligent. There's nothing special about, we are on the roll. India is rolling. And I can say this in many, many little things. We are ambitious. The young are ambitious. I use the word ambition very carefully, because unless you're ambitious about what you do, no one's going to take you seriously.
Well, you've seen that Russia-Ukraine war is into its second year now. India took a very calculated call, even through a lot of bullying, a lot of calls against India, and said that we were not going to join one bloc or the other, and we will be staying neutral. We'll talk to all the parties involved and have some kind of a peace effort. Do you think that this was a very pragmatic and a very, even though risk-worthy call, but this was a call that only India could take?
I have a lot of respect for Mr. Jaishankar. I do. Yesterday, someone told me here that India's position was a problem. So I asked that person, problem for whom? And the moment this is what they don't like. because we are talking back. And you may not agree with, I may have my issues with India, but internationally when people don't like us to talk back, you know, and this is what it's happening. There's a war in Europe, and I think Mr. Putin has gone far too far, and he can't now get out. He will not win this. So I don't say this, but he will be, his own people will take care of him, and let me leave it at that, because he's very ambitious. It's a war. You know, the arms dealers are happy. Can you imagine? It's a bonanza for the international arms dealers. And I mean, I have lived in Europe for so long. I think I'm very ambitious. I'm a European at heart and Indian at heart. And today, Europe cannot defeat Putin, not yet. But I think it's happening. I think he's really pushed people to think. Overdependence on Russian oil, overdependence on this, and taking for granted. Someone told me that they do not have a plan B in Europe. I said, can you imagine? You have been the worst hit by you know, the bombs that were dropped, Normandy landing. You have been the worst hit by the World War and the Second World War, and you don't have a plan B. You know, so then first you get your plan B. Don't worry about India. We'll take care of ourselves. And I believe that, you know, we have made a few mistakes, but I look upon Mr. Jaishankar as I have a lot of respect for him, because he's sitting on eggs. You know, people don't understand that he has 1.3 billion people to take care of. You know, I mean, when people vote in India, it's 800 million people. That's twice the population of Europe. You know, Mr. Jaishankar is sitting on, you know, it's not easy, his job. And people do not appreciate that. You have to look at this from the Indian point of view. Oh, India has a point of view? Really? Yes, we have a point of view. And unless people stand up and understand that we are the world's largest democracy, and we are on the move, we are on the roll, that is unstoppable.
Well, speaking about bullying,
Yeah.
I want to ask you about China. And you saw what happened a few years ago in the Galwan Valley. Perhaps after 40 years, for the first time, there were guns perhaps used, and there was a massive clash that happened, and there were casualties. Even though we do not know how many Chinese casualties happened, and that's been the trend from the Chinese side. And we saw similar provocation in Tawang and several other areas as well. How do you see India-China relations going from now? And do you think the kind of expansionist tendency that the Chinese have had will only continue and grow further?
Yes. China, I can tell you, they're ruling the world. Trade. Look at any trade, multilateralism, climate, and they are very silent. China is running the world now. We can't say that for India because we are not. And it's, you know, for them, democracy is what they are party position. They do not understand. And I am not afraid of China. I am a little afraid of Chinese because we don't know what's happening in China. And I live in Geneva, let's say, take an example. WTO, they have their person. Entire UN system now is bowing to China. What they do, they buy off ports here and there, and then they rule. They're ruling human rights in Europe through Greece and other ports. They just buy. We are not in the same league. And I really want to state this, that India is not in the same league as China. I don't know if it's even a good thing to be like them, because I think we are a democracy. We are looking at our own model. So, Samir, I just said earlier, he was the first one to call them out. And it's important to call out constantly what is wrong. And you may not have a solution, you may not have an answer, but it's important to call things out and in the hope that something will happen. But China is heads and shoulders on top of America, there's no country that can catch China.
Well, you've been closely monitoring and observing the developments at the United Nations as well.
Yeah.
I want to specifically ask you about UN reforms, you know, in particular about terrorism. There hasn't been, India's been a victim of terrorism for a very long time, but the convention on terrorism, the definition of terrorism has been pending for decades together at the UN. Why has UN failed completely on this? Secondly, on the human rights as well. You know, UN freely and openly for years together has been calling out the so-called human rights violations in India. But the same UN does not do that for Pakistan. Why such a open hypocrisy?
Okay, so I need to say I was a senior UN diplomat, so that I understand things from another perspective. Pakistan's media and Pakistan's image, they really manage the human rights. I mean, they're really very careful and very smart and very quick-footed as to what's happening at the UN. But tell me one problem, Aditya, that the UN has solved. Think, zero. Zero issues that they have solved. The United Nations reforms, they need, the P5 need to accept that today the P5 don't run the war. I mean, you have two countries that will be to everything, Russia and China, and the other three are democracies. So it's an interesting that you see, when we became nuclear, when we launched a thing, they didn't know what they were doing, and they don't know what they are doing. UN is now today a moribund organization. It needs new energy, it needs new people, it needs new thinkers. And that's not going to come from this, the P5. No, it's not going to come from the P5. I know India is want the reforms, terrorism being one. But the UN is a folk tongue, it's a very folk, they speak with several tongues. And the Human Rights Commission is a joke. I'm sorry, I'm being very straight, but you have states, in the Human Rights Commission that are dictators. I don't want to take name. Pakistan is running the show. Pakistan has a very suave presence in Geneva. We don't have it. They are very quick, and they are very. You can't compare, because our officers, they have to go through a process. Pakistan has no process. They just decide what they have to do and they do it. That's what is the army. The army work.
India is one of the most populous countries in the world. It's the 5th largest economy.
Yeah.
It has played a very dominant role globally in the new international order.
Yeah.
Isn't it time that India should be part of the UNSC?
Yes.
And do you think that India not being a part of the UNSC, some countries or a couple of countries blocking it time and again, it further makes the UNSC completely incompetent?
Yeah, they are incompetent. They are incompetent because, you see, they were made at a specific time in history. That time has passed. And countries like Brazil, countries like Germany, they should be on, they are the heavy hitters. Look at Germany, it's a heavy hitter. Brazil is a heavy hitter. They are not in the UNSC. So that situation of the UNSC, that entire logic has passed. And they need to realize that they have become irrelevant.
One final question that I want to ask you back home, domestic politics. How do you see the changing and churning within the Congress party? Congress party hasn't been in power for quite some time now, but the internal reforms that are being talked about, that a president has been changed, and non-Gandhi is a president finally, but do you think this will change the dynamics of the Congress party in the course of history?
I don't think so. And when you said I brought a government down, no, I don't think so. And this I don't think so. It's not framed to change. And I'm sorry to say this, but Mr. Rahul Gandhi is not a politician. And there's no point in running him down because he is not a politician. No, I don't think the Congress party will change. Not yet.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Aditya. Good luck.